Created by James Mitchell. No More Games. Written and read by Craig W. Braddock. Chapter 6. For years, Callan had suffered from dystopic nightmares. What used to be known as lack of moral fibre was by 1985 not quite known as post-traumatic stress disorder. But what Callan had did not exactly fit the definition of shell shock. In the midst of one of his many nightmares, so real but at the same time tenuous, Callan drifted into a deeper sleep, and eventually the workings of his brain kicked him into a semi-conscious state as he tried to half open his eyes. The windowless room served as Callan's bedroom, a single bed on a metal frame with a striped mattress that in places may have been as thick as 2.5 inches. Callan had not registered he was unclothed, but without opening his eyes he knew he had company in the room. Before Callan could say anything, Lonely piped up. "Here's a nice cup of tea, Mr. Callan. They wouldn't let me wash, I'm sorry. They said I had to stay here and look after you." Callan stared up at the naked light bulb, and a blinding pain ran across the back of his eyes, sending him straight onto his back. A minute later, Callan just said, "They've drugged me." "They ran in when I got home, Mr. Callan. They stuck a needle in you. They're outside in the living room. I have to tell them you're awake, or Mr. Mears said he would hurt me again, Mr. Callan." Callan slowly sat up, nodded to Lonely, and just managed to open his eyes and cringe through the pain. Toby Mears entered the room, this time in a three-piece suit. He looked very smart, except the striped shirt did not exactly match the pinstripe design on the suit. Mears clicked his fingers at Lonely, and Lonely stood to attention. "Hello, David. Hope you didn't mind, old boy, but we had to take some drastic action." "Oh, yeah?" The pain in Callan's head subsided. Mears sat down on the bottom edge of the bed and smiled. "It was all a trick, David. A hoax, just to see how you would respond. Every place you have been since we first met has been bugged. We know what you have been doing, every sentence, every reaction, every emotion. We engineered it all to see if you would hold up. I have your report here, David. Would you like to see it?" Callan looked down on the bed. Whatever scrap of dignity he had left, he was determined to maintain it and not look Mears in the eye. Callan shook his head. Mears pulled a piece of paper from his jacket pocket, unfolded it, and started. "Well, old boy, I don't have to read the grisly details to you, but you're unsuitable for active duty, you're way too old, you're a psychological wreck, you have nightmares, you're lacking in moral fibre, and you—" Callan looked up, and the anger in his face took years off him. He leaped out of the bed and, despite being naked, charged down on Mears. Grabbing the back of Mears' hair, Callan started banging Mears' head into the metal bed frame. 2 violent blows later, and Mears' eyeballs were already rolling around his head, but the banging continued. 4 more blows, and Callan held Mears' head up. He was somehow still awake. "I will fucking kill you for what you've done to me, for what you've done to Lonely, and for what you've done to dozens of other poor bastards who had the misfortune to meet you." "Callan, violence will not be necessary." A man stood in the doorway. Immediately, Callan recognized him. It was Hunter. That is to say, the Hunter Callan last knew. His hair was now a shock of white, his face more the colour of a well-hung steak, and he was a tad more portly. But his voice still had that familiar, hated tone. It was undeniably Hunter. Callan threw Mears to the bed. Thankfully, Mears only had a splash of blood on his forehead. Callan rolled him over and removed his gun, handed it to Lonely, and just nodded. But the message was loud and clear. Putting on his underwear, Callan then walked towards Hunter, and they both left the room, Callan securely closing the door. Dressed in tweeds with a red sweater, there was something vaguely festive about Hunter, but Callan knew from long experience that Hunter, no matter who he was not given to bouts of joviality. Sitting opposite each other in the tired old armchairs, it suddenly struck Callan the two old armchairs contained the two oldest people Callan had ever worked in the section with, himself and Hunter. Hunter would not quite look Callan in the eye. "I'm not apologizing. We needed to test you, and you failed. You failed miserably. You failed every test the section has, except one. You scored top marks when assessing your sense of justice, compassion, and morality." The word morality was almost painful for Hunter to say. "Well, I need a man that fits that criteria. Someone who can react when there is danger, and someone who can bring a sense of justice, compassion, and morality to the section." "Cut the bullshit. What do you want?" "We need you to overlook the work of a new agent for the section. This agent is more than a pretty face, Callan. She has scored the highest ever scores recorded in section tests. Oh, he says here except for sadism. Still, no one is perfect." Callan stared at Hunter. "You've got to be fucking kidding. A woman agent in the section? Come, Callan, times change. Besides, you can see it as a favour to a dear colleague." Hunter whipped out a black and white photo from his pocket. A much younger Callan, say 15 years younger, with a small girl on his lap. Her features looked familiar. "You met her shortly after you arrived back in 1970, Callan. Oh, and you met her more recently too." From the shop, a woman, blonde, good-looking, possessing a shapely physique, yet still looking fresh-faced and young, entered the room. "Mandy, actually, Callan, meet Hannah Cross, daughter of Agent James Cross. She's your new protege.